Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to my weekly behind-the-scenes DM-only live stream in which I build, write, and prepare for our next session of Rime of the Frostmaiden. If you're playing characters Valravn, Frey, Celeste, Edmund, or Thimbleweed, this video is not meant for you and will be full of spoilers for our campaign. Go away. But to the rest of you, welcome aboard. We stream our D&D sessions live on YouTube every Friday evening. You can watch all of our D&D live series as well as reviews and Let's Plays on my YouTube page. It should read channel and read weekly session recaps at roguewatson.com. You can follow me on Twitter at roguewatson and join our official Discord server with invite link in the description below. And you can support the channel at patreon.com/roguewatson. For our campaign, we use Roll20.net. For streaming, I use Open Broadcaster software with Streamlabs. Starting on time today. How exciting is that? I rolled a nat 20 on the baby handling check. Unlike yesterday's Let's Play stream. Hello, Michael, Farty, Nathan, Lord Anubis, I presume, Jerome, Forbreezy, Pegleg, I'll give you a shout out even though you had to leave. Stan, good to see you. So, we need to actually talk about the mountain climb quest since we kind of didn't get there during our last session. And I already talked about how the random encounter I had constructed for the one random encounter for the path between Tourmaline and Kelvin's Cairn, the players thought was a quest hook, which is fair, and now I may have to turn that into a full-on side quest because I have created basically an interesting adventure hook into the Dwarven Valley, which does not exist in the Rime of the Frostmaiden at all. Even though the Dwarven Valley is apparently a major part of the Forgotten Realms lore, and it's, an actual place with Dwarven, tunnels and mines and homes, and could be rife for adventure. Yet it is glossed over in the campaign book. So I created a little bit of a tease, like, oh yeah, the dwarves are finding, the Chardalin, the Black Ice, and that's probably bad. And the players are like, oh, that's probably bad. We should go there. And I'm like, oh, crap. You could, I guess. And as I mentioned in last week's Frostside chat, it all came down to one roll that I had Edmund do because he, because of his player secret, is very interested in Chardalin and Black Ice. And I made him roll a persuasion check, I think with advantage, I don't remember, against the dwarves. Because the dwarves were still very... they don't recognize the authority of the 10 towns. They're very much themselves. They're not hostile, but they're not friendly, is how I was playing that situation. And so ultimately they rebuffed them. Now the players could have really put their foot down and followed the dwarves and really gone after it, but I think that's kind of that unspoken agreement between DM and players where they can kind of tell when I'm putting up roadblocks. But in this case, I think they accepted about why these roadblocks would make sense versus me just saying, oh, I don't have content for this. Because I would have absolutely I would have switched gears completely, had to rename the session from Mountain Climb Part 1 to just, I don't know what it would have been because it wasn't any mountain climb. And then we would have gone right into the Dwarven Valley and then maybe done an adventure from there. I do have, as part of one of the DM's Rime of the Frostmaiden DM's Guild adventures, I'm looking through my folders. What was it called? Adventure bundle. Ooh, who did this? It has a dungeon for Halls of the Black Ice specifically. Design this. I can't see what I'm looking at either because I've only got it tuned to Roll20 at the moment. By Daniel Kahn and Michael Rosenthal. I believe it's called the Adventure Bundle, and it includes like 3 side quests that you can insert into Rime because they all take place in Icewind Dale, and specifically are designed for different levels and different areas and exploring. Now, one of them I'm almost for sure going to use, which involves the Goliaths as a side quest, which is really cool. Another one I may use, which involves an underwater dungeon going from to the Isle of Solstice. The third one I wasn't going to use, which is the Halls of Black Ice in the Dwarven Valley, but now I'm like, oh shit, I may have to actually use this map. Unfortunately, the actual dungeon involves, you know what, let me set up, you'll give me 1 second, I will set it up so you can actually see what I'm looking at right now. Those of you listening to the podcast, sorry, you're not going to be able to see this. Let's see, window capture. is a DM's Guild window. Let's add source. And we're going to put that right above. Okay, this might work. So just for a moment, you're going to see what I'm looking at. I'm going to switch off of Roll20. And this is what I'm looking at for what I would have done. and what I probably will still do because they're interested in following up on this. But this is from the Adventure Bundle. I don't know if you can actually purchase these separately or not. But one of them is called Danger in the Dwarven Valley. And it involves an entire really nice full-color battle map. You can't... Sorry, my graphics are kind of covering the last third of the image, but it's got a whole adventure that's in the Dwarven Valley in this halls. Unfortunately, the actual what I would maybe use is the map, but unfortunately, the entire thing is actually geared towards a druid that is creating a bunch of. It's been corrupted and it's one of the frost druids basically supposed to be, and it's a bunch of plant monsters. So unfortunately the theme doesn't actually fit, and the dungeon itself even has like painted on like plant growth going crazy. So I'm not sure how much I would be able to use it, because what I would want to do is turn it into a almost like the first Resident Evil movie where you're like going down and you don't know like what's going on, and you go in there and it's just like full of, you know, evil basically, and you're trying to figure out like what happened and all that. And that could be a really cool scenario that would build upon the dangers of Chardalyn and Black Ice. Probably what's going to happen, because I've put that in the player's mind as a danger that's going on, but I kind of rebuffed them in terms of going in there, is maybe after they go around, they do, you know, they finish Mountain Climb, they do Caer Konig, probably they go down to Caer Denival, because I did give them that quest from Cora about, hey, can you check on my son? Maybe after dealing with that and really discovering the dangers or the potential power of Chardalyn via that Black Swords, whatever that cult is called. Maybe from there they will be like, oh shit, we need to really go check on these dwarves. Or I can have a dwarf eventually find them and be like, you know, he's maybe part corrupted or he's dying or something. Be like, oh, you've got to come help us. We're so sorry we rebuffed you, and you know, please come save our clan or something. So I could still insert that as a quest. Frankly, I don't really feel the need to add almost any new content to the adventure, specifically in the first third, because remember, we're dividing up the adventure between 3 different kind of acts or storylines. The first one being just bumming around 10 towns, doing a bunch of quests, kind of getting to know the people, and then ultimately starting to seed the Dwergar threat, which culminates with the Chardalyn Dragon. And then the second act will be more about the Arcane Brotherhood and learning about what they were doing here, and ultimately leading them to Vaelish Gaunt being a big villain with Ness Lantimir, and how they essentially found Ithrin and pissed off Auril and did all that. Which the whole time I'm kind of seeding the fact that Chardalyn and Black Ice is an important thing that's affecting people that was originally from Ithrin that broke off. So I don't know if I want to put this in the first act or the second act, basically, because I feel like I've got a ton of content for that first act already, and that first act is pretty much tier 1, but I think I would include level 5 if we're assuming that they make it to Sunblight at level 5. So I may use something like this later, in other words, but probably not for at least a couple more side quests as it is. So we'll switch back to our usual programming. Back to Roll20. All right, because we need to talk about the Mountain Climb quest and Kelvin's Cairn. So, hilariously, even though last session was Mountain Climb Part 1, we didn't actually make it to the damn mountain yet. When are we going to get to the fireworks factory? We did not make it there this session. But we are going to make it this week. What I have planned... First of all, I think this is a really cool area because it's so flavorful for, Icewind Ale, the classic, like, snowy mountain and the dangers that can arise there. It just... If you're going to run Rime of the Frostmaiden and you're picking and choosing which quest to run, I can't imagine anybody would not choose to run Mountain Climb in some fashion or some way. Like, it's just, it works so well. The only trick is you would have to have individual encounter maps, because the overarching map is kind of that. It's cool. It's that big, side view of the map, but you can't have battles on this map itself. This is the actual mountain map. So what I've had to do is basically add some additional kind of encounter map. So think of this as like the overland travel map, and then you do the Final Fantasy and you go in and actually have the encounters. The first thing that they're going to do is have to get to the base camp. Now it says in the book, and we'll catch up on the chat in a second, that they have to actually find the base camp first, which involves I think a group survival check. Go to the actual mountain climb section. Let's see, mountain climb. So we're skipping. We journeyed already. Let's see, climbing Kelvin's cairn. Before they can follow their quarry up Kelvin's cairn, the characters must locate Garrett's base camp at the foot of the mountain. Now, if they had a guide, the guide can lead them there, but they don't have a guide because they left from Tourmaline. They don't have the dog either, so without help of any sort, the characters can spend 8 hours searching for the camp on their own, finding it with a successful DC 15 survival group check. If the group check fails, they can repeat it after another 8 hours of looking. Now, the weird thing is, as written, there's no penalty for this. It's just a bunch of checks. So, as a DM, you would have to say, okay, well, it's night, you got a camp, maybe I'll roll for an encounter. That all seems a little fiddly. And it's frankly just more work for the DM. So, what I'm probably going to do is say, you need to all search. I'm not sure why it's a group check here versus just letting whoever the leader is make that survival check. I guess technically everybody can search together, but I feel like that makes it harder for the players unless they're more, a party full of rangers or something. And if I'm remembering how group checks work, I believe the entire party basically makes a skill check. Let's see, is this actually something I can look up? Ability checks, group checks. Yes, it is. Let's see. To make a group ability check, everyone in the group makes the ability check. If at least half the group succeeds, the whole group succeeds. Otherwise, the group fails. They don't come up very often. They're most useful when all the characters succeed or fail as a group. Okay, so specifically when adventurers are navigating something, the characters can avoid hazards. It doesn't say whether you round up or down. Does anybody know the answer to that offhand? I need to round. Sent them to you. Oh, sorry, I'm reading. What are we sending on Discord? Oh, Dwarven Valley maps. Okay, sweet. I'll check those out after the stream. In the future, I do plan on maybe adding some Dwarven Valley content, but for now, focused on mountain climb. So if you have mountain maps, I'd be interested in that. I will show you the maps that I've got for now. So for group check, everybody makes a survival check. I don't know if at least half the group succeeds, that means it would have to be, if there's 5 players, you'd have to have 3, because 2 is not half. 3 would be more than half. So you'd have to have 3 successes out of 5 people making survival checks. And what I would do to make it easy is just say, if you succeed, you find the camp, no problem. If you fail, it takes you longer, and maybe everybody has to make a con save, or you incur a level of exhaustion because you're tired, and then you find the camp. I'm not going to turn this into a big, oh, you got to wait another couple hours, and I could roll for stuff and blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to make it a very simple, you succeed, you get there, you fail, you get there, but there's a penalty involved. So I think that's how I'm going to work that. We can actually check everybody's survival checks. What would be a good DC for this, by the way? It says 15. I think in the... Yeah, 15, which is pretty challenging for people that aren't into survival. Well, Robin's got a +1. Ray has a +0. Kind of weird, the Wildling Barbarian's got a +0 survival. Celeste has a +1. I have a feeling Thimbleweed's going to be very pissed at the rest of the party. Edmund weirdly has a +2. Wise Artificer. And Thimbleweed has a +6. He is the ranger. So, odds are they will not succeed, given the survival check. Modified by, yeah, I mean, weather, that's true. Weather makes it hard. I mean, it's dark, it's nasty weather. And I haven't really imposed any, like, blizzards or anything like that on their way. I had that one encounter because I knew I was going to have all these other challenges. Like, this really is a gauntlet of events, which I think is pretty fun. This is essentially a linear dungeon crawl, by which I mean you walk and it's a series of events that happen to you. There's not a whole lot of exploration the players can actually do here, which is why I'm inserting a little bit of exploration at the base camp. And then we do have a mini dungeon with the frozen cave once they actually reach to the top of there. So, yeah, we're liking 15. What do we think about the... if you... I know, and Jason, I agree. That's why it's weird that the text actually calls for a group check, because it's like, well, why wouldn't you just have the leader, like the person who is skilled in navigating, let him just take the reins and lead everybody. Although it does specifically say group check, but see, that's a group check where it's like you're all moving through the area trying to avoid dangers. There's not really a danger here you're avoiding, other than you're basically just trying to find this camp in a decent amount of time. That's what the check does. And you find this camp before you all get tired from just marching around this frickin' mountain in the harsh elements. In which case, I don't think a group check would be necessary there, versus just letting, the ranger take point and be able to do that. So, yeah, group check. Well, I'll tell you about my Avalanche rules in a second. So, I'm thinking I may change that to the leader makes... Lead Explorer makes a DC 15 survival check. And then if they fail, what's funny is that if they fail, everybody gets screwed. Because that means that you have not located the camp in a decent enough time to where now you all have to make, I'm thinking maybe con saves rather than just instantly give them exhaustion. Make it so that some people who are hardier can just be like, oh, well, this is a pain in the ass, but we're going to power through it. And that way you've got, a save before you actually have to worry about exhaustion, because I know exhaustion is pretty big. Con saves in this party are much better than their survival checks, too. Alright, so I'm thinking, yeah, and obviously Thimbleweed would be the one with a +6. Which, gives them like a little better than 50% chance to pass? Nobody else is proficient in survival. No, only Thimbleweed, and he's got a +6. Everybody else is like a +1 or a +2. So if they fail, they're still going to make it to the base camp. It's just going to take them probably like an extra hour or two of searching, or however I want to flavor it. And then I would maybe make everybody make a con save against exhaustion, which, what would be the right con save for that? It wouldn't probably be 15. I'm thinking maybe either like 10 or 13. Con save for exhaustion. That gives them another, kind of another barrier before that. Maybe I'm being too nice, but it seems like you would be, even if it took you a while, if you were just more hardy, you could kind of withstand the elements. So yeah, that'll be getting to the mountain. And then we've got the actual base camp that we're trying to locate. So the base camp, this is one where I actually do have a map for. I decided to spice things up because in the text, the only thing you find here are the rest of the sled dogs. I put a sled here, but I didn't put any dogs here. And what I did put was a snowy owlbear. So we're going to switch to that map now. Base camp. So this is a really good map that's from one of my favorite artists on the Roll20 Marketplace that you can find at Quick Encounters Snow and Ice is what it's called. It's on the Roll20 Marketplace, which is a really great resource for finding random encounter maps. And I use this artist, Gabriel Picard, for a lot of my Tomb of Annihilation encounters. You can see I still have Quick Encounters, Jungle Ruins, and Jungles. This one, I don't know how much I'll use some of these maps, but this one in particular, called Winter Valley, just fits fantastically for a base camp. And I've got the dynamic lighting set up where it's all going to be more you know, like you're approaching a mountain and there's this little valley nestled in here with these tents, and it fit perfectly with what I was looking for. So I turned this into an actual map and an encounter, with the caveat that it doesn't have to be a combat encounter if the players play their cards right. So basically they will approach the camp and they will see this giant lumbering snowy owl bear rooting around and basically just destroying everything. And it's going to be their choice on how they want to handle this. They could try and just sneak past it. They can try and they can try and pretend it's a beast and use some kind of calming beast spells or something. I need to see what all they've got. But keep in mind, this is not actually a beast. It is a monstrosity, which is a weird thing. So like a lot of monsters that look like they're just animals and have the intelligence of an animal, it's got an intelligence of 3, is technically not a quote-unquote beast in terms of the mechanics. And maybe most players would know that an owlbear is technically a monstrosity rather than a beast. So they would actually be able to use that. Maybe they could, I'm sure Edmund will try to treat it like the polar bears. Although, again, it's not a beast, it's a monstrosity, but it's got an intelligence of 3. So it's really going to depend on how the players want to play this. If they want to really play it smart and use tactics and play their way right, then I would maybe let them get past it without combat. But this thing is hungry, and it's been, driven in desperation from the elements to where it's just hunting around this mountain looking for any kind of sustenance. So most likely, as soon as it sees the players, it's going to charge and attack and roll for initiative, and it's going to turn into a combat encounter. And it's only one. This is not meant to be a big fight. It does have a mess of hit points, and yes, I did roll for its hit points. I think I roll. Where did I roll? I don't think these things normally have this many hit points. Did I prep this before last session? I must have, which means it's not going to be on here anymore. We had a whole session, yeah. But these things have an average hit points of 59, and I rolled 74 for its hit points, so it's actually pretty damn meaty. It does have multi-attack with beak and claws. Would probably not fight to the death, however, which a lot of these monsters wouldn't necessarily do that. So that's the thing. If it turns into a combat fight, it could retreat after a while, but not meant to be a huge, nasty fight. And yes, the players could do something to shut it down. At level 3, I don't know how much crowd control we've got. Suggestion, I don't think works on... I can understand you. Yeah, you couldn't understand it. And I don't think... It's not a beast. I don't think Thimbleweed can use any of his ranger spells, because he's got Speak with Animals. But it specifically says beasts. Sense. Such a willing beast. That's not going to work. And with nature... I'll do the land within 3 miles of you. So yeah, I don't think they've got any ways of dealing with that. So this is not necessarily a forced fight, but could very well be a fight. Not going to pay Chris back by giving them a Yeti. Oh, Stan, the Yetis are coming. Yes, yeah, as Jason mentioned, there are you don't put a mountain quest in Rime of the Frostmaiden and not throw a Yeti or two at the players. That's basically the boss fight of this dungeon, which is pretty cool. So this is going to be, again, designed to soften the players up, which they kind of already had that. Keep in mind, I had that little Startling Berserker fight that softened them up just a bit. They did a pretty good job of not expending too many resources. They didn't do a whole ton of damage. That was only one enemy, and this is another case of just one enemy. The more important thing here is that they will find journal entries, which is a classic, designer storytelling device, because that's how they learn more about what happened here. All the provisions and stuff will be destroyed. There are not going to be any lootable things that you can find here, because the people either took everything with them or the bear destroyed most of it. But because this is important story stuff, the players will find a travel log by one of the adventurers who was a Perilou Fishfinger, which I believe was a halfling cleric. And that will explain basically what happened since these adventurers arrived to when they got here to the base camp, which those of you that watched our Tomb of Annihilation campaign will remember I did something similar with the Company of the Yellow Banner. I included a bunch of handouts the players could basically make checks on like a sending stone type thing to get information of. And that one was fun, but I realized that they got all this information, within sessions around 20 or 30 or something, and then they didn't get the payoff until way like 40 or 50 sessions later because the adventurers, are in that final dungeon. That's where they find them, find the remains at least. This case should work a lot better because you're going to get this journal entry, and then hopefully, like by the next 2 sessions, as you're exploring this dungeon, you will find those party members and get more of that story. So this should work a lot better. I literally just created this in Roll20, by the way. I have these paper parchment things from that Vile Tables subscription pack that I used to build our landing page called Vile Tiles: Tabletops. And I threw that on there, threw some text on there, and then literally just did print screen, which is why you can still see the graph paper underneath because I got pretty lazy about it. And created a little travelogue that one of the characters made, and basically talked about how they made it to Icewind Dale, how everything was really bad. One of the Goliath warriors trying to find what's his name, Oya Minartok, which is a Goliath werebear, which is supposed to be a rite of power for Goliaths to use. So I thought that'd be a fun tease on there, and then maybe later introduce this character. And then they receive that tip that Dazan hires them to go to Kelvin's Cairn. And then they journey across the map towards East Haven, and they go north to Caer Konig. They pick up a guide, which is going to be Garrett, and then go to Kelvin's Cairn at the base camp, and that's basically all the information they get here. They get the actual letter from Dazan that I created that they kept within the pages. And I'm also considering adding a map, which is literally going to be this map, as kind of a fun, you also find a map tucked into the pages, like this was the guide's map. And then I could even try and I'm debating on whether to include the actual blue trail or not. So everything you see on here, minus where it says base camp, because I just added that to the token layer, is on the GM layer. So the players can't see any of this. They just see this map. So I thought it'd be interesting if the trail was actually like the guide Garrett, pointing out, here's the route we can take to get up to the top of the mountain, which is the safe way to get up there. And then I can have the players go do as they kind of follow this path. And that's basically spells the fact that this is a pretty linear area that you can kind of follow. Essentially the one trail you can take to get up here. So I'm thinking I might actually do that and include this map as part of those handouts they find. So they get a lot of information out of this camp, which means I actually don't want them to sneak past the owlbear, do I? Because I want them to get this information. So you know what I may do? I specifically don't do this usually, which I don't put them on the battle map too early with events because I don't want to push them into a fight. What I may do here is the opposite. I may actually put them on the map earlier than when I usually do that because I want to encourage them to fight the owlbear, because I do want them to loot what's in this camp. And hopefully they would realize that's probably a good play for them as well, to be able to see, if there's any interesting stuff to get in here. And this isn't really a stealthy party anyway. I don't think they would necessarily sneak past it. So that is going to be their first big encounter. If it acts like a beast, then it is a beast. I know it's a weird thing. There are creatures that have beast intelligence but are technically not mechanically beasts. They are monstrosities, which is if they're, I don't know, just slightly mutated versions of normal beasts, then they are considered not beasts. They are monstrosities, and owlbear is certainly one of them. Maybe for the express version of rangers not being able to use their thing against them. So after that, we can start climbing the mountain. The first event is they meet a bunch of mountain goats. Now, these are normal mountain goats, and this is a case where you could use some of your ranger abilities, and I would probably encourage that. I thought about, I could make these the evil Aro ones where it's got the glowing blue eyes and they could do the frost breath, but we just had that snowy owlbear encounter, and I think the goats would be... What the funny thing is, the players are probably going to be paranoid about these goats, about them doing something, but I would certainly allow it if Thimbleweed or somebody wanted to use, speak with beasts or use animal handling to calm them down or something, to walk up and try to converse with them and then gain some information, which would be, the goats aren't, they're fucking goats, but maybe they could say yes, some folks passed through here, however long ago. I need to figure out my timeline, but I don't think I don't think it's supposed to be very long. I think it was that they passed through. They were in that store a week ago, so it probably took them. In fact, I've got it on my travel log, don't I? Yeah, sort of did this work. 3 days ago, they made it to Caer Konig. 2 days ago, they made it to the basically the mountain at the base camp. So really, they've probably been here at max. I don't know what. I didn't have a timeline from when they left the base camp to when they climbed up the mountain. So anywhere between 1 and 2 days, they've been up here because I couldn't have it be too long. Because I think there's still, the surviving adventurers in that frozen cave being battered around by yetis. Like, you can't have been there for a week. So it's got to be, within probably 24 to 48 hours or something. The goats aren't going to be able to know that time necessarily that closely, but they can at least say it wasn't long ago that they passed through here. And maybe to tease the fact that they're like clumsy and watch their step or something funny. Then we'll weed the ghost whisperer. Maybe the bear is fighting some sled dogs. Oh, that's true. That's an interesting idea, Jason. Maybe the bear is fighting some sled dogs. So I wasn't going to do the dogs, but that would compel... Oh, man. I don't want to have... What I don't want to do is any kind of gore or violence against dogs. I don't like that. I know most of my players don't like that. I think most people don't like that. It's funny that you can do horrible things to humans, but with dogs involved, everybody's like, what the fuck? So, it wouldn't be like a grisly scene or anything. Throw a bear pun in there. But I don't mind the idea of having it be, like they're growling and the bear is kind of coming up and being, scary, and it looks like this bear is going to fuck up these dogs. Maybe there's only one dog left, or a pair of dogs, and not that the others are dead, but that they managed to get away and this one's kind of caught, got its collar in there. Yeah, that would be interesting. The problem is, what do I do with this fucking dog then? Do I have the dog just like join the player? You've got this dog as the other, like, it's a cool idea, but then the player's like, are they gonna adopt this dog? You can't put it in like your backpack or something. It's a fucking dog. That's my only concern. I guess you could leave it at the base camp and be like, or let it go and it would like run away and presumably, go back from where the others came or something, which would be, it would know its way maybe back to Caer Konig. But I don't. That's interesting. I may actually include that. I'm gonna think about it some more. But that would be a great way to kind of force the players into a fight. Could easily throw. I don't think I have a dog token, but do I? The equivalent of it. There's not a beast section here, is there? I'd have to probably just use a wolf. I think dogs do have their own stat block somewhere. That is a very wolfy looking wolf image, unfortunately. So I could probably find some kind of Malamute or something to use as a dog token, but that could be interesting. I mean, and the adventure as written is supposed to give you a dog ally. Let's see, is it just called dog in the, what is the fucking, or is it's Mastiff, isn't it? I think Mastiff is the stat block. Yeah, so I could probably just use a Mastiff stat block. Although I thought Mountain Climb does say dog somewhere. Oh no, it does say use the wolf stat block. Interesting. Okay, I could use the wolf stat block, I guess. I'd still want to find a different token though. Wolves are a bit stronger. They wouldn't have the frost breath. That's something I added in there. Okay, yeah, I could use either one. Wolf just has the ability to knock them down. It's got pack tactics. Mastiff does not have that. I'm not worried about giving them. I'm not worried about giving them like a oh, you get an extra NPC ally or something. I'm just worried about the upkeep between like, oh god, we can't take this dog up the mountain. Like, what do we do with this fucking dog? Or maybe if they want to have it, one of the companions bonds with a fucking dog, then I should just let that happen. Like, if you want to have an ally, that's one thing that we've never really done very well in our campaigns. We've had obviously sentient allies with our party, but in terms of like animal friends, they usually don't. They're usually more of a like flavor thing, like the flying monkeys in Tomb of Annihilation or something, where it's just kind of a funny joke. It's not really a mechanical like ally that's actually with you, because I feel like if that's the case, you're probably playing like a ranger or the artificer, whatever the one that has the pet. You know, there's actually like better mechanics for that versus having that dog with you. But you know, if it's a small thing like it's a squirrel or a bird or something, you don't have to. You know, a flying monkey, I didn't have to have a token for that necessarily. But I feel like a dog, it kind of you'd have to keep up with a token if they want to have it. But you know, if that ends up being a fun little thing, and that's a cool story, like you can save the dog from the owlbear. Okay, I'm liking this more and more. You're kind of convincing me. Create a token user can pick up a sled dog and give it to the mastiff on the wolf stat block too much. It's like 12 of them later. Yeah, that's true. I don't see them necessarily doing the whole sled dog thing. I see them more like either eventually they get that wagon back and they hitch, you know, axe beaks to it or something, or they just get on axe beaks like tauntauns and roam around those. That just seems a lot more interesting and fun and fantasy to me than just having a bunch of sled dogs and having to keep up with sled dogs too. That's a lot of mouths to feed, brother. Yeah. Which was never really came up much again. So yeah, the goats, I'm basically just letting that. The one thing I was gonna do is if they really like just either pissed off the goats or treated them badly or got close to them without trying to calm them down, the goats would like bleat at them as they got near, and that maybe causes them a dex save, or they slip and fall and take like, you know, 1d6 damage or something funny. So it's kind of a mini trap if they technically don't really do anything, but I'm assuming they will try to engage with them in some way. But maybe not. Who knows? I mean, it's hard to, you know, assume what players are going to do. All right, for the Avalanche, which is the next thing that comes up. I'm actually going to pull up another DM's Guild thing for this. Where was that? And this one is from Evan Tier Games, Rime of the Frostmaiden DM Guide, which is another good quality product. I'm not using too much up, but if you obviously watched our first session, I used that foaming mugs quest from that. I want to flip on the DM's Guild window one more time. Okay, so this one is, and this is separated into chapters, but I think I opened the one that's got all of them in here. Where was Avalanche? There we go. Wilderness Survival. So this one has what I think is a way better system for Avalanche. So as written in the book, we're going to have to go back to this. Go back to what the book is. I got to swap all these windows around. All right, mountain climb. You guys are still watching the DM's Good window. That's fine. All right, so the Avalanche. See, avalanches. It seems really weird. It doesn't. When an avalanche occurs, all nearby creatures must roll initiative. Twice each round on initiative counts 10 and 0. So you put everybody in initiative order, and then on 10 and 0, the avalanche travels 300 feet till it can travel no more. When an avalanche moves, any creature in its space moves along with it and falls prone. The creature must make a DC 15 strength saving throw, taking 1d10 bludgeoning damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a successful one. And it moves, 300 feet a turn, which basically means it's just going to come hit you. It turns the whole thing into essentially a single strength save, and you take 1d10 bludgeoning damage. Now, you can get buried under it, in which case you have to be freed with a DC 15 athletics check, and you're blinded and restrained, but there's no other, you know, if it's not in the middle of combat, like, who cares? Like, eventually you're going to get that person out. There's no real, you know, mitigating circumstances or failure there. So I found that not very satisfying. Instead, what I found was in Evan Tier Games' DM's Guide bundle, it turns the Avalanche into a skill challenge. Now, I know skill challenges are divisive for good reason. Like they can over mechanicalize, gamifying too much things that maybe you want the players to be able to think outside the box and use different tools for, rather than just saying, okay, use this skill, use this skill. and you don't want to use them too often. But what they can do is give you a range of successes and penalties, which in this case I think works very well because it gives the players multiple checks, and then depending on how many successes you make is how well you're able to mitigate the damage and the terrible things that happen to you during the avalanche. So I don't know if I'm going to use this exactly as written, and I'm really interested to hear all of your thoughts on how this avalanche plays out. But according to Aventure Games, first you set the DC for the skill checks and saving throws. It recommends DC 10 for easy, 13 for moderate, and 15 for hard. One thing I would look at is maybe even changing the DCs for each check depending on how hard or difficult I think those particular checks are. So in this case, we use 3 skill checks for every single player. There's a perception check, an acrobatics check, and an athletics check. Basically, perception to try to see, like, the avalanche is coming, where's the best way to, like, avoid it. The acrobatics check is basically you trying to avoid it, and the athletics check is trying to avoid being, like, knocked around by it. It does mention if you're proficient in nature or survival, you have advantage on all checks. I don't know if I'll include that or not, but maybe. And in this case, if you make all 3 successes, you essentially don't suffer any penalties. You're free and clear. If you make 2 successes, you take 1d10 bludgeoning damage, but nothing else happens. You take a little bit of battered damage as you escape. If you only make 1 success, then you take 2d10 bludgeoning damage, and you're partially buried. And if you fail every single check, then you are swept away. You take 3d10 bludgeoning damage, and you are buried under the snow. Now, this includes rules where if you're partially buried, you can try and free yourself by using a athletics check. However, there's no like penalty if you're buried. And in this case, or if you're partially restrained. And if you're buried, oops, roll down too fast. You're blinded and restrained and must make a con saving throw at the end of each minute, suffering 1 level of exhaustion on a failure. Which to me would be like, here's how I've done it. Someone who's not partially buried, and I would just say if you're partially buried, you can free yourself eventually. There's no check there, whatever. However, if you're fully buried, then someone who's not partially buried can locate the buried person with a perception check and pull them out with an athletics check. And if those checks fail, the buried person must make a con save or suffer a level of exhaustion before they're pulled out. So, and again, I don't want to have to, make you, okay, do this again and suffer another level of exhaustion. It's like, no, it's just, again, if you succeed, you pull them out without having to suffer another penalty. But if you fail, then they suffer. And I don't know, maybe having 2 checks is too much with perception and athletics. Maybe I just choose one or the other. And you can play around with the DCs to try and make some of those more challenging or not. But I thought, and maybe that's too much insult to injury, the fact that they get buried and you've already taken 3d10 and now you're going to have to have somebody help you or you suffer more damage. But this makes avalanches a lot more scary, and it creates some interesting ways for players to like, oh, do I want to use an inspiration here? But then there's more checks coming, and some of them, it's going to be all kinds of different damage depending on how players rolled. And I would like to do it where, everybody first makes perception, and then I record everybody's successes, and they don't know what the DCs are. And then everybody makes the acrobatics as it slams into them. And then they again have to make those checks. And then I record successes or failures. And then everybody has to make the athletics check. And I've got it written where I was going to have it if they roll. So, and here's how I'm balancing it. And again, I'm very much willing to hear feedback on this. The perception check will be a DC 10. It's not hard to see an avalanche coming, but it might be a little bit challenging to try and see, okay, what's the best way to try to, avoid this? So that's going to be an easy check, DC 10. If they roll a 20 or higher on their perception check, then they will get advantage on the next check, which is the acrobatics check. That one is going to be a DC 13 because that's a little trickier to try to, dance out of the way and avoid this fucking avalanche coming down at you. And again, if you roll a 20 or higher on this one, then you've really avoided the worst of it, and you gain advantage on the third check, which is a DC 15 athletics check. So notice I'm making it progressively harder. Which that one you're trying to like basically hold on to something as it kind of crashes down no matter where you've ended up, to avoid being like swept away by it. So DC 10 perception, DC 13 acrobatics, DC 15 athletics check. But if you roll really well on some of the first ones, you can gain advantage on the next ones. That's kind of how I'm flavoring it. And then I am keeping the partially buried and buried thing, but I'm basically saying there's no real penalty to being partially buried other than you can't be the one to help somebody who's buried because you're trying to get yourself out of the situation. And if everybody ends up either partially buried or buried, that means the buried people would they'd automatically have to make that con save or take a level of exhaustion before the other people can basically rescue them. And I think I would keep it a DC 10 con save for the exhaustion. So that's my plans for the Avalanche as a skill challenge. It's kind of a... I don't know if it's even a proper skill, because a lot of skill challenges, they have a lot of different failures and successes, and they allow players to use different skills. In this case, I'm kind of turning it into a multi-process trap, basically, where it's, instead of making saving throws, you get to make skill checks, but you're all making the same skill checks based on what's happening at the moment. Now, here's the question. If somebody said, well, I want to cast this spell instead of making this check, I would probably allow that. Because they're spending a resource at that point. That's even better than making a check, technically. So, for example, if Dwarven says, you know, when I say everybody make an acrobatics check to avoid out of the way, if he says, can I Misty Step? I would probably allow that, although 30 feet's not going to get you far enough away. He could technically Misty Step into the air, but then he's 30 feet up in the air, you know, or maybe you could go, 15 feet up in the air, and then you'd have to, you'd fall down and take that damage, which is technically not as bad as, I guess, this damage. But I would include that as a success in terms of this. So, we kind of have to play around with it a little bit, but if the players wanted to be more proactive about, well, can I do this or can I do that? Then I would probably, yeah, Nathan, you're on the same boat. Yes, there obviously is a bit of a chat delay on the chat for me, but yes, that's what I'm going over. Then yes, I would allow them to do that, because that's what D&D is. You want your players to come up with all these cool, crazy schemes, and use their tools that they have available to them, and especially if they're expending resources to do it, then absolutely you should let them do it. In this case, spending a resource is even better for me than just making a skill check, because that's, one less spell slot you've got, for example. I think that's the only one I can think of that would be able to escape like that, because I believe for Thimbleweed Swarm to work, I think he has to attack in terms of being able to have his swarm move him out of the way. So in terms of anticipating what players are going to be able to do, I mean, you can't entangle the Avalanche. I'm trying to look through their spell. Let's see what Edmund can do. Which I guess I could turn the DM's Guild window off and go back to Roll20. Let's see. Grease. No, that's not going to work. Grease the Avalanche. I don't think the monk has anything at this point that she can do. I don't believe so. So yeah, I don't think they've got... The only one I can think of is if Valravan wants to use his attack the Avalanche. What else are you gonna do? So yeah, I would absolutely allow that, because again, you're expending a resource. You can use that as an auto success, but in this case of Misty Step, 30 feet is not going to be enough to avoid it unless you're going literally into the air. There's nothing that says you have to end up on the ground on Misty Step, just a point you can see. So I would have to tell him, you would have to Misty Step, unless I wanted to say, maybe if he rolled really well on his perception or something, he could Misty Step up into a rock or something. It'd really depend on... I would maybe make him roll a perception check, although everybody's already rolling perception for that first round. So maybe based on that perception check, I would allow him to see something that wouldn't be, literally have to go up in the air, that he could teleport to within 30 feet. But, I mean, there's no way to otherwise avoid the Avalanche. And that would just count as one success, and then he'd still have to make, another success for the third one. So that wouldn't be like it would be an automatic get out of jail free card. Which one does Step with the Wind do? Is that the one that gives you your jump speed, or your tripling your jump? Ah, you got that one. Maybe you don't. Let's see. Step on the Wind. No results found. Oops, I guess I don't have it right. Search for Monk. Monk. Classes. Is this the right one? I don't know about Step on the Wind. Where do you get that? Unarmored key. Deflect missiles. Slow fall. Where is Step? Ability they have right off the bat? Martial arts. Strike. Key points. Flurry of blows. Patient defense. Step of the Wind. That's what I meant to say. You spend 1 key point to take disengage or dash as a bonus action, and your jump distance is doubled for the turn. I mean, I would rule that if you want to spend a key point to double your jump, but keep in mind her strength isn't good. Double her jump distance, I'd say okay, you gain advantage on the acrobatics check or something. That's pretty easy to rule, I think, right there. But again, these people aren't going to be able to jump, 10 feet or 20 feet or even, 40 feet to avoid this avalanche. This thing is hundreds of feet across. So at best, you're getting, advantage on these rolls. I don't know if this actually, yeah, this is not to scale. These are just 5-foot grids. So we've got the owlbear, which I'm liking the idea of forcing that into a fight with the dogs. Although probably not a fight to the death. I would think the owlbear would eventually retreat. The mountain goats, meant to be just if anything, hey, Ranger, do you want to talk to these goats? And then the avalanche is meant to be this kind of complex, multi-step trap encounter where they're basically going to take damage unless everybody rolls really well on all their different skills. But the nice thing is, because it involves a lot of different skills, most likely, unless the dice is really good, you're not going to make all of these different ones. You have to make perception, acrobatics, and athletics. Which, boy, and I've looked at this party. They're not good at perception, at the very least. So that should fuck up a lot of them. Which, D10 can be pretty nasty on some of this damage, too. And then we get to the Fallen Climber. So I presume this is going to be probably as far as we make it on tomorrow's session. Because we've got, getting to the mountain. We've got, which is going to be that survival check or possible exhaustion. We've got the base camp, which is going to be an owlbear fight, which fights always take a while. We've got the goats, which could be a funny thing or could be nothing. The avalanche is going to take a little bit of time. And then the Fallen Climber, which is also a battle. And in this case, they find their first member of this expedition, which is the actual guide, which is Garrett. And this one I'm pretty much running closely to what's written in here, where he's been injured. In fact, I think he's unconscious. Yeah, barely conscious, it says. A humanoid and blood-stained cold weather clothing. The figure in the score is Garrett Velren. He's a scout, 1 level of exhaustion and 6 hit points remaining. In addition to his weapons, he carries a climber's kit. His other equipment is lost. And the dog actually will... So that's interesting. If they save the dog will come up to Garrett and immediately start, helping him. And then... Yeah, if the characters tend to his wounds, Garrett comes around and tells them that Yeti surprised them and his companions higher up the mountain. He lured the Yeti away from the others and got it to chase him down the mountain. The Yeti wounded him seriously, but he escaped with his life, and the monster stopped following him. And then as the characters tend to Garrett, 2 crag cats move to within 20 feet of the party and attack, each one pouncing on a randomly determined party member. The crag cats caught Garrett's scent, but failed to reach him before the character showed up. Characters with a passive perception of 17 or higher, not surprised. So what's interesting here is the game basically telling you, don't roll for stealth, just take 10, because I believe their stealth is a +7. Yeah. And just count that as their stealth check, which I'm not opposed to doing. And then you can have these crag cats attack the players. Now, these are only CR1, but they are hilariously large. Large monstrosities. And again, similar to the owlbears, where they're not animals, even though they look like they're fucking animals, but they're just giant man-eaters that are not meant to be like normal beasts. Unlike owlbear, they don't have, first of all, near the hit points. They're only CR1, and they do not have multi-attack, which is a big deal. The only way they can multi-attack is if they get their pounce off, which most likely they're only going to get that off in that first round, because once they've engaged, they're probably just going to take too much damage from attacks of opportunity and things. You never want to take the disengage action as a DM, I feel like, unless you're retreating. But if they attack somebody with the pounce, they force a DC 13 saving throw and knock them prone, and then they can make a bite attack as a bonus action. So the thing here is they're very good at stealth attacks, and nobody in this party has nearly enough of a passive perception. As I just mentioned, the party is pretty garbage at perception. We've got like 10s, 11s. I think Edmund is weirdly might be the highest perception at like 14. So I am going to be getting a surprise round with these crag cats. Now 2 is not nearly enough. My player's level 3. Yes, they've been softened up, and this is another chance to soften them up. So the big question I'm asking all of you is, how many crag cats do I want to have in this fight? 2 does not seem like nearly enough for CR1s. I do have a map. I got this one off Reddit, I believe, which looks kind of like a mountain climb map. I'm not too enthusiastic about it. So, and Anubis, I will check the ones that you've been sending. If any of you have any pointers for good mountain-looking maps, but this is kind of what I've got so far. There's Garrett. I took this from, again, one of those subscriptions that came. This is like from Xanathar's or something. And then I've got these crag cats. Once I started adding to the map, though, I was like, oh shit, these guys are hilariously huge. So I don't know if I actually want to use this mini, because like physically they just take up so much space on the map, and I want to, you know, make it so like these are tight mountain paths that we're going on. Like there's not a lot of, you know, room to maneuver, and that's part of the challenge. You can see this is kind of the way dynamic lighting works. It's almost like a switchback right here that they find the fallen climber on. Or again, I could use a different map for sure. Yeah, Anubis, and that's why I've got 5 here. I was thinking 1 for each party member. And I think this would be another case of I don't think these crag cats would fight to the death either. Like it's one of those where I think if there were fewer, I don't know if it actually says that in the text or not. Oh yeah, if one crag cat dies, the other one disengages from melee combat and tries to flee down the mountain on its next turn. So in this case, I would flavor it, you know, as half. If half the crag cats go down, then they would retreat. So that would help speed things up quite a bit. And I think it's really just going to be that opening attack is going to be really nasty, because, you know, if they get that surprise round and they're stealthy, that means they have advantage. They do that pounce. They're probably going to hit with that attack. And then if somebody fails the strength save, they also get to do the bite attack, and then that was all in surprise round, so that'll be a big, scary thing. But then once the players start rallying and actually fighting them, you know, they've only got a 13 armor class, the average hit points at 34. Even though they look scary, they're actually not that scary. We can roll for hit points, though. We always like doing that. Big question is whether you think your party will actually fight the Yetis later. If you think they all roleplay, it would be nice, then you can crank this encounter. I mean, that's for them to decide. I just give them problems. My players, what's funny is it's impossible not to meta-knowledge the Yetis. And they know how fucking scary Yetis are. And for those of you that watched their Storm King's Thunder campaign, Chris unleashed Yetis on us as a random encounter that he just literally pulled out of his ass. He was like, oh yeah, and there's monstrosities coming at you. Not knowing how strong they were. And we were level 4 at the time, and they almost like TPK'd us. Like, it was real bad. We had to like play around with like, oh, fire, and the Yetis like back off. You know, there's a lot of unmechanical stuff with that, just so we wouldn't kill us in this random encounter. That one was also funny because a Yeti had disadvantage on me and still critted me, I believe, twice, which the odds of that happening are insane. My character went down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 hit points. Crag cat number 1 is a 40 cat. Number 2 is completely average. Number 3 is the alpha male, 42. Or mama cat. This one is a little bit runty at 26. It probably averages out to even across the board, I think. In fact, you might say that 34 is their average hit point. So I'm liking the idea of having a bunch here, but with the caveat that they will retreat if too many of them fall, which might be that first round. Like, they get the surprise round off, the players immediately start rallying and start taking them down, and then like the next turn the cats will be like, oh shit, we need to back off. That could definitely happen. Probably grab down characters and run too. Whew. Maybe. I guess you'd have to. I don't know if they can do that. You'd have to grapple them, so you'd use one of their attacks to grapple, and then you'd run, but they would have half their movement. I mean, mechanically, if you want them to grab and run, there's some steps involved there. It's interesting they have a climb speed, so they can actually just climb up the cliff mountain. What I'd like to do is play around with them, like really surrounding the players here too, because the players obviously want to rush to help, Garrett. And then I could have, I've got them on the map right now. And again, I may change. There's a good chance I'll change this map. But I could have like more of them, appear from down here and really just completely surround the players, or back here in some way. Because with that stealth check, I mean, this is their mountain. Like they should absolutely just surround the players and get off that alpha strike. The red dots are to designate which cat is which, so that way the players don't say, I'm attacking the one to the northeast of you. You can just say, I'm attacking cat number 2. That's something we figured out in 2 Annihilation. It works really, really well for our party, just for pure organization in terms of when the players call out attacks with a lot of enemies that look the same, numbering them just helps a bunch. You say, cat 4 is going to attack you. It just makes it easy. And I think that's as far as we're going to get. Like I said, this is we may not actually, depending on how long those earlier fights and those scenes were earlier, we may not even make it to this fight. If we do, then this will probably be the last thing that we do in tomorrow's session. And then we can plan on prepping. Garrett will obviously, and Garrett will have a lot of information. He'll be able to really, they've got information from the journal in the base camp. They got information maybe from the mountain goats. And then assuming they can revive Garrett a bit, they can learn everything that essentially happened that he knows, which we need to talk about some story stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have time right now because we're pretty much reached the end of this stream. But in terms of my idea was, Dazan hired this adventuring party to go up to Kelvin's cairn so that he could search using maybe some kind of magical telescope that he had or something, and look for any sign of Ethrin, because the Arcane Brotherhood has learned that there's something here. Valishgaunt had found something, and they're looking for, what's going on here. They've learned about the Chardalyn. Essentially, the Arcane Brotherhood knows what's going on, and it's stuff that the players will eventually start learning. And what I'd like to do is kind of tease that without the players. And the idea is, Dazan found the Lost Spire of Netheril. He found that location. How he escaped from this predicament, I'm not sure. He used some kind of magic, maybe to just leave the rest of the party behind. Essentially made it all the way to the top, kind of fucked everybody else over, and maybe used, fly or something he cast to get out of here. He essentially wanted the protection to make it up here, and then made it to the Lost Spire of Netheril that he saw. And I would love to be able to tease that that's what happened without the players then finding the Lost Spire of Netheril, even though I want them to find it eventually. So I'm trying to grapple with how do I, because my problem is if I go to the top and they look through the telescope or whatever that Dazan used and see the Lost Spire of Netheril, they're going to want to fucking go there. Like they're going to be like, oh, this is how you continue this quest chain. And I'm not necessarily wanting them to go there yet. I would rather them go there as part of the Act 2, like, hey, start looking up the Arcane Brotherhood stuff. The problem is I need a way to do that. And I haven't figured that out yet. So I'm still working on how to introduce the fact that that's what happened here. And, I could have it where they find the telescope somewhere else, but then I don't want them to have to go back up the mountain. Like, that would just be a pain in the butt. So I'll need to figure out some way of introducing that in the story, and that's going to be partly what I'll be working on. But I think that will do it for this week's...
No, I came down to spy!
No, you don't get to spy. You are not welcome here. That's what I said in the beginning. Hooray. So thank you. No, what are you doing? Yes, for joining me for crafting Icewind Dale. If you enjoy the content, please check out patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Time Dancer, Manuel, Wizard, Princess, Christopher, Thomas, Captain Mike, Adam, Aiden, Instant, Luz, Smog, Roger, Stan, and Nathan. And gold patrons RPG, Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcos, Dade, Vicente, Gilberto, Dead Lizard, Lounge, Sam, Ross, Slumpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy 619, Cleaning Nick, Party Mick, Butterpants, Blood, Angel, Veronis, Baboon, Sean, AK, Cert, 2B, Nathan, and Fast Like Tortoise. I will see you all tomorrow night for D&D.